What's cracking, everyone? This is Solomon SK for Whiskey and RPGs, and if you're new to the channel, we always start off each episode with a toast, and since we're talking about Star Wars, today's toast will go to BioWare for making awesome RPGs, and yep, here's to you guys. I do appreciate you guys checking out this video, and let's just jump straight to it. Cheers again, everyone. So, is Star Wars The Old Republic worth playing in 2020? The answer is obviously more nuanced than that, but let it be known that I am assuming everyone is watching this video in hopes to be convinced, or at the very least be aware of some of the changes that occurred over the years so you can make a better and informed decision. Otherwise, I could have made a video titled Why You Shouldn't Play Star Wars The Old Republic, because it sucks, and use a clickbait title and such, I suppose. I've been playing this game off and on since launch, and although I'm not the ultimate authority of everything Star Wars The Old Republic, if there is such a thing, I want to download my entire brain into this video in hopes that it provides at least some sort of meaningful insight, so let's get started. We'll start with PvP. You have three options for PvP. Battlegrounds, or in this case Warzones, that comes in the form of either 4v4 deathmatch and 8v8 with various objective-based competitions. Galactic Starfighter, which pits you in a ship with a group of up to 12 other pilots, and lastly World PvP. As of right now, open world PvP is pretty much dead. You can go to each planet and choose the PvP instance on the bottom right hand corner of your map, and PK players all you'd like, but it's completely barren. You can walk down and across the entire map without seeing a single soul. The only possible exception to this is probably the Gree event that takes place in the planet of Ilum. There's usually a handful at any given moment, plus there's an event quest that can be completed towards the middle of the map that automatically flags you in PvP regardless of what instance you are in. But even then, groups can go down there without any problems for the vast majority of the time. And just be warned, because in Ilum, you can kill players even if you belong to the same faction as them. It's a free-for-all, basically. Not to mention, the Gree event only happens every 2 to 3 months. There's also a PvP zone in Tatooine called Outlaw's Den, but that too is completely dead. Second, I wanted to talk about PvP Warzones. The biggest difference you'll notice between now and when the game first launched is that it's no longer Republic versus Empire. I mainly play on the Republic side, and it's not unusual to be in a group that's majority Empire. There's something that happens within the storyline that justifies this shakeup, but I won't say anything more in case of spoilers. But I think BioWare did it for more pragmatic reasons. As with any MMO and other online games, there's always going to be a slow, or sometimes even fast, drop in population. It wasn't unusual for queues to be in the 30-minute range for a match, but because of the limitations of the hero engine that Star Wars The Old Republic utilizes, the developers were unable to program a way for cross-server PvP gameplay, or at least that's what I was told. But I believe this explanation because it's counterintuitive to think that a company would want to demise its own product and lose profits when this feature has become pretty much an industry standard now. I'm sure BioWare saw something in the hero engine at the time, but I digress. Therefore, gone are the days of queuing in line for half an hour, although it sometimes does happen once in a while. You have the usual types of competitive modes, such as Star Wars The Old Republic's version of King of the Hill and Capture the Flag from launch, and don't worry, they kept the Hut Ball for those of you who love that kind of game, with new maps being added along the way, but probably the biggest change is the Odessen Warzone, added back in 2018, I believe. It's basically King of the Hill, where the first team to reach 600 points win, but there are random power-ups and buffs that can be picked up to further disrupt the flow of the game. And if you know anything about ranked PvP, yes, it's still toxic. Unless you want to really be hardcore about it, I'd avoid it at all costs. All ranked PvP matches are 4v4, so it's best to go in with friends and coordinate. If you pug it, just be warned of all the potential salt your way in general chat after each match. The last type of PvP you can partake is Galactic Starfighter. Personally, this is my favorite mode of PvP in Star Wars The Old Republic. They added this back in 2013 or 14, and you can choose one of 4 types of crafts: a bomber, gunship, scouts, and strike fighter. Quick rundown: bombers have the ability to deploy turrets and mines, as well as hyperspace beacons for quicker spawn points and healing droids. Gunships are powerful ships with cannons that allow them to snipe enemy players from a huge distance. Scouts are lightly armored but also the fastest and most agile ships in the game, with the ability to buff nearby players with life-saving boosts. And lastly, the Starfighter is the workhorse of any fleet and has the balance of firepower and armor than any other type of ship in the game. Galactic Starfighter was also an Empire versus Republic PvP battle, but that too has now been mixed. There are 2 types of competition for Galactic Starfighter. One is domination, where you capture objectives, and the first team to reach 1,000 points wins or has the most after 15 minutes. The other is your standard team deathmatch, where you get points for each kill and the team with the highest wins. Just be warned, it's pretty standard these days for most PC setups to utilize dual monitors, if not more. During a match though, if you drag your mouse across the screen, you'll lose control of your ship because the mouse will just drag onto your second monitor. I personally use a program called Cursor Lock to remedy this problem. It works with other games as well, and I'm not sponsored by them. I just wanted to let you know that there is a solution to this problem. Now let's move on to story and lore. When people say Star Wars The Old Republic has one of the best, if not the best story and story implementation of any MMO, they are not exaggerating. Hell, you can even argue that they have better storytelling than even some of the single-player non-online RPGs in the industry. But that can also be a curse, and let me explain. This is an MMO after all, and one of the main reasons why people play online games is to mingle with others, group up, and be social. With this game, however, you can complete the entire main storyline, quests marked with the color purple, without having to group up with another person for all its entirety. There are some quests that require you to play through a flashpoint, which is Star Wars The Old Republic's name for dungeons, but even then they added a feature where you can summon an overpowered helper droid to finish the instance. It's nearly impossible to die with this helper droid, not to mention it could also tank and DPS as well. So if soloing is more your thing because you're a huge Star Wars fan but not necessarily a huge MMO and or video game player, you can actually get through most of it being a free-to-play player. It's super easy to defeat the enemies and get through the content without having to worry much about gear. Just use whatever you pick up and it'll be more than enough, since BioWare made it so that all your companion stats are determined by their influence level rather than gear. Any gear you put on your companions are for cosmetic purposes only. If you want to get through the most recent content, however, such as Knights of the Fallen Empire, Knights of the Eternal Throne, Onslaught, and such, you need to be a premium member with a membership of a standard $15 a month. In my opinion, even if you were to play casually, a month is still enough time to get through the entire content in terms of its storyline. Even to this day, having voiced dialogue for virtually all NPCs is a feat that hasn't been matched in any MMO. Maybe Star Citizen will, but I'm not sure, but that's besides the point. So it's very possible to immerse yourself in the world where each choice of dialogue has consequences, such as who lives and who dies. BioWare has always been known for that. But that also has some unintended consequences. You'll notice that not a single new class was introduced since the launch of the game. As immersion in voice dialogue is one of the selling points for this game, it may have been weird to introduce a new class that doesn't fit that overall story arc that the other classes have. And even if they could pull it off, the cost of doing so would have likely been astronomical. But is Star Wars The Old Republic a glorified single-player MMO? Not necessarily. Let's move on to Conquests. Conquest is basically a competition where guilds with the most amount of points can conquer a planet depending on the week. There are weekly point goals where, if met, you will be given additional rewards, which as of recording is 50,000 points. But there are additional incentives to get Conquest points with the guild, as you can see here under the Conquest tab. One thing I do want to point out, however, is that you can farm points all by yourself while in a guild if you choose to do so. However, on the left side, you'll notice the different objectives, and the ones that reward you the most points are typically going to be the ones that require you to be in a group with other people and guildies, such as completing a flashpoint with all guildies or finishing an operation with 8 or 16 people. You can decide what you would like to do, but it's highly incentivized for group play. Another reason why Star Wars The Old Republic isn't a glorified single-player MMO is its dungeons, or in this case flashpoints, and operations and uprisings. As I said before, there are certain times where you can use the OP bot to help you get through the flashpoint for its storyline. However, there are a number of ways you can get through an instanced content with varying level of difficulties. Veteran mode flashpoints allow any combination of classes to get through the instance and have Kolto nodes during boss fights, which heals the entire group when used. It's super easy mode in all caps. Master mode is your more traditional way of getting through, using a tank, a heal, and 2 DPS, and a basic understanding of the boss fights as well. Uprisings are on the same level as Master mode flashpoints more or less, but it's supposed to take a lot less time to complete than a traditional flashpoint, but an emphasis on understanding the fight mechanics, and there can be a lot. And for the most hardcore, Nightmare mode operations. No thank you. All this being said, I do believe that you can get the most out of this game and its community if you join a relatively active guild that uses Discord. I've made many personal friends through this game, and although the community does has its WTF moments, but let's be honest, what MMO doesn't, overall you will come across very helpful individuals throughout your gameplay. But of course, not mandatory. Now we'll move on to crafting. There really isn't a whole lot to talk about now that we're nearing the end of this video, but there are some things worth mentioning if you haven't been keeping at all with Star Wars The Old Republic. Obviously, this game doesn't have the traditional crafting system where your toon creates and gathers all by him or herself. You send your companions out on missions to gather mats, and in some cases the only way to obtain these mats are from the companion missions, such as Underworld Trading for example. But you likely already knew that. The companion influence level is no longer 10 but is now 50, and each time you send out your companion on a mission or on a crafting job, influence is also rewarded. You can now technically get your companions up to level 50 this way, but it will take forever and I wouldn't advise it. BioWare completely changed the companion system in the game during the Fallen Empire, but I can't say anything more without spoiling the story. Just know that for me and many other players, the game had become a Pokemon game where you try to get as many companions as you can, even if it wasn't necessary. But what about the role players? Well, if that's more your thing, you'll be happy to know that there is a small but strong role-playing community, and I do believe after all the numerous server and mega server merges that they can be found in the SWTOR server. And in case you're wondering, I am in the server, but no, I do not roleplay. On top of that, they added player housing called Strongholds, where you can decorate your heart's content and create the Star Wars house of your dreams. I must admit, I went through a phase where this is all I did and created my Strongholds in a way that my characters would have liked. Shut up, Meg. Next up, grinding. So before I go on here, I think it should be noted that the main MMO I play these days is Black Desert Online, so my tolerance or definition of what's considered a time sink may be a little different from other people's perception. With that being said, Star Wars The Old Republic is one of the least grindiest MMOs out there in my opinion. Back when they raised the level cap from level 70 to 75 not too long ago, many people were able to obtain this in a few hours. Now, that could be good and a bad thing. Less time worrying about levels and get straight right into the endgame content. But at the same time, the quality of the expansions and the updates were a bit disappointing. Getting max level used to be an accomplishment, but this is no longer the case. What about money? Well, one of the easiest ways to farm credits is to run heroic missions throughout the galaxy, and you'll be pleased to know that all the heroic missions can be found in one spot in the fleet. And when you pick up each heroic mission, you'll get a quick travel item that will instantly teleport you to where you need to complete the mission. This is very convenient and saves a lot of time, but gone are the days of map exploration and organically coming across quest givers and their dialogue. But you still have that option if you choose to do so. There are other means of obtaining money, valor, which is your PvP rank, social points, legacy level, titles, and all sorts of achievements as well. But because this isn't a comprehensive video and wouldn't be able to talk about them without going over 5 hours, just know that it's still your run-of-the-mill type of MMO. Lastly, I wanted to talk about the cash shop. I know this can be a dreaded word, but I think there has to be a healthy understanding that in order to provide a game we all enjoy, that means paying the people who create the game so that they too can feed their families. But I get it, some companies can take this way too far, such as most Eastern mobile titles. Like I said, I mainly play Black Desert Online, and whether or not they have pay-to-win items in their cash shop isn't debatable, even if one calls it pay-to-convenience instead. Anyways, with that being said, I would categorize Star Wars The Old Republic on the less egregious side, with a few exceptions. Looking through the cash shop and using my unscientific math, I would argue the vast majority of the items in here are cosmetic, maybe 80 to 90%. But do be warned, they have RNG boxes, and we all know how much EA loves their RNG boxes. There are other really weird things like unlocking the ability to hide your hood on a character armor, but you can usually buy this unlock from the Galactic Trade Network for fairly cheap. Matter of fact, you could actually buy a lot of other features and unlocks, such as additional character slots and additional playable races through the GTN. But many people would consider the ability to sell cash shop items in-game for credits as a pay-to-win feature. Just ask ArcAge Unchained. But in my opinion, the most questionable restriction for free-to-play and preferred players at least is their credit escrow. As of recording, the amount of credit you can carry with you and have available at any one time is capped at 200,000 for free-to-play players and 350,000 for preferred. I've played many free-to-play MMOs, many of them from South Korea and China, and I must admit I have never seen such credit restriction before. I personally think that the $15 a month is worth its value. I used to have the opinion that in many ways it's almost impossible to enjoy the game at a hardcore level without it. Thus, it feels forced, but I have to find the middle ground somewhere. Plus, I tolerate and to a huge extent enjoy games like Black Desert Online, so I can see if somebody pointed out my double standard, admittedly. But as I said before, Star Wars The Old Republic is on the less egregious side of the pay-to-win problem compared to what's out there in the market. Overall, Star Wars The Old Republic is a game I keep coming back to for whatever reason. Sometimes I can't explain it. It left a mark on me, and even though it came out in 2011, I feel a bit of that same nostalgia from watching the older Star Wars films I saw as a child. Now, the future of this game is something that's on everyone's mind, and this is especially true when BioWare released their game Anthem to everyone's disappointment. To further add insult to injury, key BioWare developers such as Ben Irving and Chad Robertson left the company late last year, further increasing the anxiety over the studio's future. But EA also said in an earnings report that BioWare Star Wars The Old Republic has made nearly $1 billion in revenue during its lifetime. So, is the game going anywhere? In my personal opinion, no. Not anytime soon, at least. Now, there has been a noticeable drop in quality and quantity in terms of the updates that we got sometime after Knights of the Eternal Throne. I mean, Onslaught was supposed to be the next big expansion, but could be completed in a mere few hours. But if EA is bold enough to say that they are committed and not abandoning the, in my opinion, much more inferior game Anthem, then it should be smooth sailings for Star Wars The Old Republic for the most part. And although anecdotal, I can think of half a dozen other MMOs I thought would have closed its doors already before Star Wars The Old Republic ever would. Defiance 2050 and Star Trek, just to name two. Well, there you have it, guys. That's today's episode. I do hope that you enjoyed it. I appreciate if you made it this far with me. And if you haven't done so, please consider giving a like and a subscription. It does help with the algorithms. And yeah, definitely let me know if you enjoyed content like this. I do plan on making more. And until then, I hope you guys have a blessed night, and I'll see you guys next time. Cheers.